It's going to be another one of those Two Towers chats, thoughts, videos, whatever it is. Hopefully I'm not going to talk as long in this one as I did in the last video. And well, for one, I have less notes, I think. Oh, maybe I don't have less notes. I've got a lot of notes for these next 6 chapters. Anyways, I'll get right into it. So this is chapters 5 through 11 of book, what is it? Book 3, I believe, which is the first half of the Two Towers, and then book 4 is the second half of the Two Towers, because of the way that it got split up, because of the way that the publishers didn't want to publish the entire book as one book originally. Anyways, we'll get into it. So briefly, I'll go through what the chapters are, and I actually wrote down the chapter titles so that I can remember them all. But to start out, we've got chapter 6 is the King of the Golden Hall. So this is the chapter where the 3 hunters, so Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, as well as the White Rider, or Gandalf the White, go to Meduseld, or to the Kingdom of Rohan, the seat of the king, and they confront and have a conversation with Theoden and Grima, actually, as well. So that's primarily what happens in the King of the Golden Hall. At the end of that chapter, they leave Meduseld, leave that castle, that stronghold, if you want to call it that, and head towards the Fords of Isen, where they're supposed to bolster up the defenses at that place. Chapter 7 is Helm's Deep, and that opens up with them realizing, oh wait, we can't go to, I think it ends with them, either the chapter 6 ends with them deciding, oh wait, we shouldn't go to the Fords of Isen, we should go to Helm's Deep, or else the chapter 7 starts with them discovering that. Either way, chapter 7, they end up at Helm's Deep, and that is massive, huge, amazing battle, and we get lots of stuff happens in that battle, but primarily it is a big battle sequence. Chapter 8 is then the Road to Isengard, so this is really just a big chapter where they're traveling from Helm's Deep to Isengard, and lots of lore, lots of information happens in this chapter, and I think I have quite a few notes regarding it as I go through. But chapter 9 is Flotsam and Jetsam. This is, they arrive at Isengard. The Gandalf and Theoden and Éomer and the rest of the Rohirrim that are with them, there's 20 of them or something like that, go around Isengard and go find Treebeard, and then the 3 hunters stay and have their chat with Merry and Pippin, and Merry and Pippin retell the story of what happened to Isengard and how it's in complete disrepair and trashed and completely overthrown and everything. Chapter 10 is the Voice of Saruman. So this is the chapter where everybody reconvenes, all the people that are at Isengard reconvene, and then they go have a chat with Saruman, and it really shows the power of him, but also it shows the power of Gandalf and how different Gandalf is now than he used to be. Is the Palantir, and this is at the end of chapter 10. They leave Isengard, but before they leave, something is thrown out of a window, and it bends the railing and it cracks the stone steps up to Isengard, but the orb itself is undamaged, and Pippin grabs it, and Gandalf takes it from Pippin, and then they leave. The chapter, the Palantir, they're heading back to Meduseld, and Pippin, as they go and rest for the night, Pippin sneaks the Palantir from Gandalf and looks into it, and basically alerts Sauron, and then they flee. Everybody flees. Gandalf takes Pippin, and they flee towards Isengard, towards Minas Tirith. And that's the end of book 3 of the first half of the Two Towers. I'm sorry about the weird lighting stuff. I don't know what's going on. I need to pay more attention to that. Then we get, so alright, I'll go through my thoughts that I wrote down as I noticed them. So Narsil was forged by Tarkil, who also forged the Dragon Helm of Dorlomin, and Angrist, the Knife of Beren. So these are both all 3 of these objects are very, very important to the lore of Middle-earth. The Dragon Helm of Dorlomin is the helmet that is worn primarily by Turin Turambar, and it super cool helmet. It's got like a dragon on the top of it, and it strikes fear into the enemies of into all the enemies that see it. And it's awesome. And then Angrist, the Knife of Beren. So that is the knife that Beren used to cut the Silmaril out of the crown of Morgoth. And as it tried to cut the second one out, the blade snapped and woke Morgoth. But anyway, so just it's in good company being forged by Tarkill. It's such a minor detail, but Tolkien thought to include one of the men of Rohan running to the well for water to wash away the spit of Wormtongue. Another went to the well, and this is a quote here, another went to the well at the foot of the terrace, and in his helm drew water. With it he washed clean the stones that Wormtongue had defiled. This is something it's very purposefully there, and it's very noticeable, but it's also, it fits with the world as well. But it's also something that a lot of authors wouldn't think to include, and just the fact that Tolkien did is super cool to me. Éowyn is well loved and trusted of all by, Éowyn is well loved and trusted by all of Rohan. So this is just a thought that, as I was reading through it, Éowyn's very young, at 19 to 23, somewhere in that range, and I don't remember where. Sometimes I think it's 19, and other times I'm thinking it's 23. Anyways, she's pretty young of a character, and for her to be that young but still that well loved and trusted by all of the Kingdom of Rohan really shows her character and what the type of thing that she's done in the lowness of Theoden, when he's basically being poisoned by Grima and Saruman. And the fact that she was able to step up in that time and has become that well loved is really cool. Gimli says, "Men need many words before deeds." This is just jibe at humans compared to compared to dwarfs, but it's just an interesting. Actually, I wrote it down, but it obviously stood out to me in the moment. So then let's see. The last words of chapter 6 are, "Far over the plain, Éowyn saw the glitter of their spears as she stood still alone before the doors of the silent house." And the note that I wrote with this is just Tolkien has such a way with words at all times, and it's such an unimportant moment to the story, but the beauty in that closing paragraph, that closing few sentences, I don't know, Tolkien as a wordsmith is just incredible. Theoden says, "But a west wind has shaken the boughs," in reference to his healing. Gandalf, being a Maya, though, came across the sea from the west, and so I don't think that Saruman or that Theoden knows that Gandalf came from the west. Maybe he does, but I doubt it. But the fact that the west wind was an active cleansing for him, and that Gandalf came from the west, is just an interesting tie together that I saw. The Hornburg is said to have been built by the Sea Kings with the hands of giants. That's another interesting phrase. Really doesn't mean a whole lot, except that what does it mean by with the hands of giants? Because there aren't a whole lot of giants in Middle-earth that we know about. We know that there are stone giants, but the rest of the things are trolls or Ents, and those aren't really giants. Those are completely separate species. So I'm very curious as to what exactly it means by the hands of giants here. Gimli finds comfort in the presence of Legolas while in Fangorn, and Legolas finds comfort in the presence of Gimli at the dike, so Helm's Dyke. And it's just the difference between them, where Gimli is not comfortable being in a forest, but Legolas, being a wood elf, is. And then Legolas at Helm's Dyke, which is all stone, it's just a massive stone barrier. He's uncomfortable there, but then having Gimli there, that the presence of them comforts him, and they both mention it to each other in those chapters, that they are comforted in their presence of the other. Theoden, "The world changes, and all that once was strong now proves unsure." Just another line that I loved. So then we get to the kill count of Gimli and Legolas at Helm's Deep. 42 for Gimli, 41 for Legolas. This is pretty obvious, pretty common knowledge. But I also wrote, who knows how many for Aragorn. And then Steve Donoghue has mentioned a couple of times in his videos about this, that the three hunters went chasing off after the band of orcs that had kidnapped Merry and Pippin by themselves. And Steve believes that, yeah, they probably would have dealt with the entire band of them if they had caught up to him. And he's probably right. If you take into account how many... I really hate that laying thing, sorry. If you take into account the fact that Gimli and Legolas together killed 83 orcs at Helm's Deep, you can pretty safely assume that Aragorn killed at least around 40 as well. That's 120 orcs, which I don't know the exact number of that band, but I don't think it was much more than that. So yeah, it's pretty impressive between the three of them. Gandalf says, a power that walked the earth ere elf sang or hammer rang, implying that the Ents are even older than the elves. Which is... There's a couple things interesting about that. One, we know that Yavanna created the Ents, created the Ents as her own, because she wanted to create her own species. But we also know that the elves are considered the firstborn, and they're supposed to be the first to wake up. Technically, the dwarves were awoken first, but then they were put back to sleep. But just the fact that that's the case, and that it says that they're even old, or that it implies ere elf sang or hammer rang. Very interesting, because they're not supposed... The way that the world was supposed to have woken up, the elves are supposed to be the first, and they basically woke up singing. So it's, I don't know, just another interesting thing. And there's several of these things regarding the Ents that just feel a little bit strange, I guess. A little bit like they contradict other pieces of the lore. But at the same time, so much of the lore that we know of things like the beginning of days is that Christopher Tolkien took the notes of his father and compiled them into the Silmarillion. We don't actually know what Tolkien would have written if he had completed the Silmarillion for himself. So that's also important to note. Gimli's description of the Glittering Caves, the one place I want to see in live action, but that I know could never live up to the beauty in the description. Actually, most of the places would never live up to the beauty in the description, but the Glittering Caves especially, and they are included in some deleted scenes from the Lord of the Rings movies, and they don't look at all like I want them to look. It's my mental image of the Glittering Caves is vastly different than Peter Jackson's was, obviously. And because of that, I'm glad he cut them, because I'd rather have I'd rather not have it in live action than have a bad adaptation of it. Rings of Power. Also, let's see, the sadness and longing in Theoden's voice as he talks of the legends of the Ents. So this is just, he's talking about how as a child he knew these stories. He grew up with these stories of the tree herders, and his longing for that time of innocence is very interesting to me, and it adds to his character so much, especially after you see him old and crippled and broken down by the feeling of apprehension while journeying toward Isengard. So this is just another, in the chapter The Road to Isengard, you feel this apprehension that the entire band of people who's going there feels, except Gandalf. But this feeling of apprehension of, I don't know what's going to happen. This is really, we don't have nearly a big enough band to attack Orthanc, attack Isengard and win, and yet they still go. And just that apprehension is palpable in that chapter. Gandalf is given the ability, and more importantly, the authority to give Saruman the choice to repent, and that's again the power levels between wizards and how that all works is very interesting and not nearly explained well enough. But the fact that Saruman does away with his white, which is his mark of authority, if you will, and Gandalf is given that mark of authority. It's very interesting. The wizards is such, the way that the Istari work is such an interesting part of Tolkien's world, and it's so unexplained. Let's see, I'm actually approaching the end of my thoughts. Very cool. Okay, where am I at? Pippin telling truthfully what he saw in the Palantir is the moment that marks his going from a boy to a man. So at the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring, he's 32. He's not even considered an adult by Hobbit standards, and he's always got this childish air to him. Except this is a turning point in it's basically dead center in the middle of the book, in the middle of the story, and it marks the turning from childhood to manhood for Pippin. And again, it's just cool to see in the way that it's written. Last note I have here is Lord Aragorn with the plant here. All the appearances of Lord Aragorn and how different he is perceived from Strider. And you get lines like this where it says they'd never seen him in this way. He seemed to be taller and more royal or more regal or this, that, and the other. And you get these lines all the time, really. Sometimes it's Frodo seeing it, sometimes it's Sam seeing it, sometimes it's Merry and Pippin seeing it, or Gimli or Legolas. Sometimes it's other characters, but this ability to see the royalty in Aragorn, in what I'm calling Lord Aragorn rather than Strider, and he even mentions it at some point that I am Strider and Dunedain. What is it? Strider and Dunedain, and they're the same person within him, but sometimes he uses a different not a persona, but he puts on a different air for the perception of others. And it's cool that how much of that is noted. So that is my thoughts regarding those next 6 chapters of The Two Towers. I will have this up on Monday most likely, and I will see. If I don't freeze, I'm going to do the next batch of chapters as well. Film that right now, and we'll see when I put that up. It might be next Thursday, just because, so that I'm not doing 2 of these videos on a Monday, but we'll see what happens. So anyways, I guess it is, this morning it was 20 below, and so I was not looking forward to doing this video with my truck off and letting all the cold seep in, especially if it was going to take me half hour to film like it did last time. This time it's only at 20 minutes so far, which is nice, but it's also warmed up to 1 below, so quite a bit different, and very happy that it's not 20 below at the moment while I'm trying to film this. Anyways, that's my thoughts. Sorry about the weird lighting thing. I can't really do anything about that. But yeah, we'll talk to you guys again soon. Stay warm.